Hi, this is Mike Fry with No Kill Learning and Rescue Suite Software, and I'm excited to be here today with some special guests to talk about an important issue to me, and that is lost and found pets. Across the United States, there's I would say, broken, dysfunctional system of microchip registries, lost and found pet databases, many of whom don't really talk to each other. And exactly what the source of that problem is and how we're going to go about fixing it is what we're going to talk about in part, as well as how fixing or shortening the stray hold period that's happening in states across the United States in the context of a broken, lost, and found system could spell disaster for pets. I've got some esteemed colleagues here today that I'm excited to welcome. First, we have Rob Goddard, who is with Helping Lost Pets, and probably the largest database that I know of lost and found pet records, a valuable resource in this space. We also have with us Kathy Pobloski, who is the director and founder of Lost Dogs of Wisconsin and co-founder of Lost Dogs of America. And we also have joining us Susan Taney, who's the director of Lost Dogs of Illinois and co-founder of Lost Dogs of America. And I guess I would like to just start this out by asking you all if you could, tell us a little bit about your work and what got you into working with lost and found pets, and then maybe kind of address this opening statement that I sort of made, that there is a broken system in effect in terms of the databases and the lack of cooperation between the players in the lost and found pet registries and things. So who would like to go first? How about Rob, since this is your main forte is the databases and the systems, maybe you could go first.
Be happy to. I got involved with Lost Pets in 2010, primarily because I noticed that I was doing rescue at the time, and I had lots of people contacting me asking if I'd seen their pet. And these were people from, 3-4 hours away. So I knew that at that point the chances of me seeing their pet were probably fairly remote, but I also recognized that we needed a better way to get the information out about missing pets. So I started to research on the internet how people were using the internet to find their missing pet, and as a software developer and a database guy, I thought, okay, well, there's got to be something out there. So I looked and I couldn't find anything. I couldn't find any system that had pets on a map. And if I wanted to buy a house, I could go and look at my area and look at all these houses for sale, but there was no way to look for pets on a map. So I set about to build one, and I knew right from the outset that the most important thing was to connect everyone that was trying to help lost and found pets, from shelters, vet clinics, volunteer groups, pet rescues, and everyone. So that's really where Helping Lost Pets came from, is that need to connect everyone and share the same data.
Can you explain, why it's so important that everybody be connected together? I mean, to me it seems obvious, but I'm curious from your words why that's so important.
Well, one of the things that I noticed in the very early days was a pet would be shared on Facebook or perhaps on other websites, and you'd start to dig into the data and you'd find out, well, that pet's already home. And that is still a common problem today. And when you start to add up all the hours, all the volunteer hours wasted by people trying to get pets home that are already home, you can see that is a huge waste of time. And we need to be able to focus more on the pets that truly need our help. So that is really, I think, the most compelling reason to share a common set of data.
Well, don't you think it's also true, and to me one of the biggies that concerns me about this is that, if if 911 Pet Chips has a lost and found pet system, and the Companion Animal Recovery Center has their own registry, and Home Again has their own registry, and people are posting lost and found pets in all these different places, a pet could be on the internet. I may, as a pet owner, think that I've shared that pet to a lot of places, but it may just be sitting out in one of these remote, hardly ever used databases, not being seen or heard from again. And so, and it makes it, to me, almost impossible as the owner of a lost pet to figure out how many places I need to go and try to post that record.
Well, and another example of that also, Mike, is when you look at shelters. I know where I live in Toronto, there are, if my pet went missing, he could end up in any one of 8 or 10 shelters in this area. Particularly if the finder didn't take him to the shelter, where he was, in the area where he was found, they might take him to another city even. So that's another hugely compelling reason to have all of the shelters have their found pets listed in one, in a common area as well, so that owners can go and search and know that they're potentially looking at every found pet.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm guessing that whole logistical problem of navigating that system is a lot of what helped with Lost Dogs of Wisconsin, Lost Dogs of America, Lost Dogs of Illinois. It's what I'm guessing you provide that service to help people navigate that complicated system. So, maybe Kathy, is that true? And could you talk a little about that work and why the current system is broken from your perspective and what you think needs to happen to make it better?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. So, yes, when we first started, we were a group of 4 women in Wisconsin. Susan Taney was one of them as well, even though she lived in Illinois. And we were fairly good at catching very shy lost dogs. That was what we specialized in. And so that was what we were going to focus on in the beginning. But it quickly became apparent that there was a huge problem with cross-communication amongst the shelters and with owners. Perhaps their dog wasn't shy but had wandered a far distance, or had been picked up by a finder and taken to a shelter that they knew about or that they liked, that they preferred, and there was no cross-communication. So now we estimate that probably about 40% of our lost dog cases that come into us fall into that category, where it's become lost in the system as opposed to being lost and out there on their own. And as there's just so many problems with the current system that we have in Wisconsin, and then we're now noticing it in other states as well. When you don't have any cross-communication, the data, like Rob says, is not going into a central location. There's just so many possibilities for error. So when an owner comes to us, the first thing that we try to do is we try to help them understand what possibly happened to their dog based on the dog's profile. Was it a shy dog? Was it lost from an unfamiliar location? Was it a friendly dog just out having a good time? Because those sorts of things was it a big dog or a small dog? Those sorts of things all affect the probable outcome for that dog. And so helping them get through that. And we would love to see shelters take on some of this as well, so that when people, because the shelter is often the first place that an owner will go to when they've lost their pet. And if they could dispense that good advice as well, we would be leaps and bounds ahead. But unfortunately now there's, again, some shelters just write a lost dog report in a loose ring binder and never enter it into any database, and the problem begins.
Oh, it is just a horrible kind of situation out there. I mean, because I've seen shelters who operate exactly the way you described. Somebody calls in or reports a lost pet, and they literally stick it in a 3-ring binder that nobody looks at, or they have shelter management software that doesn't communicate to the lost and found system. So a new stray comes in, and it doesn't go out to, say, Rob's lost and found system, which is ridiculous in the 21st century from my perspective, especially since there are some standards for sharing animal records and animal data that have emerged in this industry. It just seems shocking that isn't in place yet already. But I want to hear from Susan, her perspective on this and a little about her work with lost pets.
I've always been kind of involved with lost pet recovery. I've managed shelters, and then I've also worked with 2 different beagle rescues, and we had our own Find Snoopy and Snoopy Alert. So I've kind of always been involved with this, but once we started Lost Dogs of Wisconsin, I really did not see the magnitude of what was going on and what the dysfunction is in the animal control system. We started Lost Dogs of Wisconsin, and then I saw the need for Lost Dogs Illinois. And we started that approximately 6 years ago. And when I started making phone calls to different shelters because I knew that our state would be a little bit more unique because we have the 3rd largest city in the 2nd largest county of the United States. So we're talking about a state with 11 million people, and then the majority of the people live in the Chicago, Cook County area. And when I started calling to different shelters or people that were involved in different federations, basically the message I got was, boy, you're going to have some issues with Cook County and Chicago, just for the fact that it is very confusing. Cook County itself has 135 municipalities. There's also there's CACC, the City of Chicago Animal Control. There's Animal Welfare League. There's Animal Care League. There is South Suburban Humane Society, and all of these are stray holding facilities. And then you think about all the police departments, the vet clinics, and the rescues that hold dogs. So it's really a mass confusion, and someone almost needs to hire somebody full-time to look for their lost pet. And now they've reduced the stray hold in Cook County and Chicago, and I just want to tell an experience that I happened to observe last Thursday when I was at the City of Chicago Animal Control. There was an elderly man. He had taken the bus to come to the facility to look for his cat. Now, Chicago has no stray hold for cats. So he was sitting outside on the bench asking all the rescue people that were bringing out cats to take into their program, asking them, do you have a white cat? Do you know, is there a white cat? Are you sure my cat's not in there? And he was also calling all the other facilities that were listed. This absolutely broke my heart. I mean, we should be sitting there trying to help these people find their lost pets, or at least correct the system before we reduce these stray holds.
That's just such an interesting point, and I want to come back to the stray hold period, how some agencies or states don't have them for cats, or how some agencies are working to shorten them for dogs, which just makes it harder for people to find their pets. But I would like to get into discussing why the system in the data, like the lost and found systems, the data, why that is broken. Because it's a topic I've been thinking about literally for 20 years. When I first started thinking about it, there were, I think, 2 microchip companies on the market. There was Avid and there was Home Again, and they were embroiled in what ended up being a years-long set of lawsuits about proprietary technology and different frequencies used by the microchips, and in effect they immediately started setting up these competitive barriers and these competitive walls, not realizing that if they don't unify their systems and have one central system, it really dilutes the efficacy of a lost and found system. Like, the entire basis of their technology, the entire basis of their industry would be pointless if they didn't fix that. And of course, they really didn't. They never did. And in fact, that situation got worse because more microchip companies continued to come on the market, and each of them set up their own lost and found pet registry. And over the years, when I've talked to different owners of pet registries or lost and found systems, I always kind of get the same response back. Each and every one of them wants to be the go-to place on the internet for lost and found pets. And so they won't share their data with other people because they think of it as business and proprietary to them. And as a result of that, since they're all behaving that same way, none of them will ever succeed at it. And they will actually do harm to the mission of their stated organization. I'm curious if you know, Rob, I know you've had conversations trying to get people to cooperate and share data. Do you have a similar kind of experience, or is that, you know, ring a bell with you?
Oh, absolutely. I've spent many hours right from the time I started the website. Actually, I knew that we needed to connect and share the data. So I've contacted you know, shelter management systems, and I do have connections with a few of them now, which is fabulous. But we need to connect them all. I've reached out to other websites, other companies that have different solutions, and you know, with the hopes of trying to, you know, get them on board and say, let's share our data. Let's have you know, every lost pet record I get, I'll send to you, and you do the same. And so we'll have basically two databases that are exactly the same. And I think that would be a good thing, because, you know, the more places that someone can see the potential data, the better the chances there's going to be a reunion. And so it's not a problem to have the data in two places. What's a problem is if it's either not in both places or it's not updated in both places.
Right, right. And what is, you know, when you have the resistance to sharing data, you know, do you believe that the people who are resisting sharing the data are being direct with you and honest, or do you think there's some other reason behind their refusal to share it?
I think it likely is exactly what you said, Mike. I think it's just that everybody wants to be the go-to place, and you know, I recognize that you know, it would be nice to have one go-to place, but we don't need to one single place to go to if everybody's sharing the same data. So I do think it's some, in a lot of cases, it's perhaps ego, or what you know, other factors. I mean, let's face it, everybody's busy, and you know, I know that in my particular situation, I'm trying to add features to my site and make the search capabilities better all the time. But I also recognize too that, you know, as you pointed out, Mike, the goal is to get pets home, and we do have to work together to make that happen. We don't get, you know, these companies out there and the shelters to work together, etc. We can never, you know, reach the goal.
Right. Yeah, and just to hit the point extra hard, if maybe Susan and Kathy could weigh in about, you know, what is it like? You know, obviously Susan clearly described what a chaotic system there is in Chicago, just because there's so many municipalities. But when you merge that complexity with the fact that there's all these different lost and found systems that don't talk to each other, it seems like you're just kind of, you know, trying to push a river by simply trying to, yeah, if you could describe a little bit what it's like to try to go through that process.
Well, I would, can I add another component to this?
Sure.
What we're finding out, we provide free microchip scans at events. And what we're finding out, that many of these chips are not registered. They're not registered to the owner. They're not up to date. People have absolutely no idea what microchips do. Some people think they're GPS. We had one man ask us if there was batteries in the chip. And I think we have a falling out with that also, that people are, something is wrong with the system. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think that's another component of what's going on. The database, the microchip companies not working with each other. We also have a breakdown on registering chips and people understanding the nuances of microchips. There's a
Well, I
real
think part of that, from my take, and I'm curious to get your opinion too, but that whole registry thing, I fell apart, really. First, they split them into all these different registries. Then the companies who owned them tried to turn them into cash centers so that they would charge for annual registration or whatever, and oftentimes did a lousy job of communicating that out to the people who were, registering in their databases. And I'm sorry, I have a problem with a lost or found pet record being, there being a charge for that. I guess I don't necessarily mind a charge for registering in the first place. But I think that is such an easily solvable problem. Like, my software system, Rescue Suite software, registers the adoptions, registers the pets, the microchips, for the adopters in their name, like the day of the adoption. Not hard to do, doesn't cost any money, it should be that easy. But because the microchip companies are trying to make money off of those registrations, that broke too. Really, to me, it just seems like they've lost sight of the mission, they've lost sight of the purpose of their technology, and so the technology isn't working anymore. And the microchip companies and the registries have nobody but themselves to blame for it. And I think, to get on my soapbox just a little bit, Susan, to add on to what you said, I think that if the microchip companies got together, worked together, had a centralized kind of system where all this data would go, it would be more compelling and easier for people to get in to do it. And it wouldn't matter so much where or how people registered. The important thing is you get a microchip and you register it. And if the entire industry said that in a uniform way with one voice, there'd be a whole heck of a lot less confusion around it, in my opinion. Since you brought it up, what's your sense of that?
I think it's excellent. I think it's right on. I mean, I think we really have some issues here, and it really, excuse me, it is the point that they all should be on the same page. I mean, I had a friend who thought she had to pay a yearly registration until I told her, read the fine print on the letter that you get every year. And she found out it was for extra services. She had no idea her chip was going to be registered with that chip company for the rest of her life. So here she's been paying that $19.95 a year. And I think you're right. It's a cash cow for them.
And then oftentimes I think these companies were set up, really where that wasn't their primary business. Their primary business is selling pet insurance or some other tangential thing. That's their primary business, so they don't necessarily do a phenomenal job of, maintaining this lost leader, which is this pet system. And so it's all just a big mess. And I don't want to spend too horribly much time talking about how broken it is, but one more time, I know Kathy's got some great stories about challenges that she's had navigating through the system. I'm curious if you'd tell us just one or two stories of lost pets that were just really had trouble because of the system.
Yeah, I think lots of stories come to mind. I think in Wisconsin, we, of course, don't have the population that Illinois has, but we have the many challenges of the rural areas as well, where there is, like, for instance, where I live, which is in western Waukesha County, if my dog were to go missing, he could end up in one of 5 different facilities very easily, and I know that because I do this every day, but I can guarantee you that I could go knock on my neighbor's door and they wouldn't know that. There is no, and if you called the best known of the shelters, they wouldn't tell the owner that either. They would say, oh no, your dog's not here, and not offer them the advice of the other places that the dog could be. And because we have, the shelters are very spread out, and sometimes it's the police departments that's holding the dog, sometimes it's the town office that's holding the dog, or sometimes the shelter can be at the far end of the county. An owner would have to drive, may have to drive, make a 200-mile round trip just to check all these shelters. And what the shelter's response has been is you need to come and check the shelter in person every day. They have been very, very resistant to posting photos online. Thankfully, that has changed in about the last 6 months. We have many more shelters posting photos of pets that they have impounded online, and that has been huge. So that has been an improvement. But they were very resistant to that. Most of them were saying that, well, if we post photos online, people might come in and try to claim a dog that isn't theirs, which is really quite silly. There's so many safeguards to prevent that from happening, and we have them listed on our website. Just simple things like, not disclosing everything about the pet, keeping a few features hidden, and asking the family to bring in vet records and photos of the dog. And so, we have owners that literally get strapped for cash and cannot check all the shelters all the time, and their pet gets adopted to another family before they ever even find out where it is. So that's been one of our biggest challenges. That these dogs just, especially we have a lot of Labrador Retrievers in Wisconsin. They're the most popular dog in America, and they all tend to look alike. And we have one volunteer that calls them dandelions. They're common and they all look alike. And so we have yellow labs and black labs that do tend to go a long ways when they get lost. They're usually off having a good time, and they end up in a shelter 100 miles away. And without, posting the photos online, without the shelters participating in the process of trying to help match that dog back up with the owner, many of these dogs end up in new homes before they're ever found.
Yeah, that's just such a clear example of how and why, we really just need to fix it. I think from the database perspective, and Rob, tell me if you agree, it seems to me like should just simply breaking down the barriers to share the data between those systems would be a huge step in the right direction. So people could log on to any website basically that deals with lost and found pets and see all of the data. That's just how it should be from my perspective. Do you think it really, to fix that part of it, is that simple?
Oh, it absolutely is that simple. One of the websites that we are connected with is called rescuegroups.org, and they have quite a large number of adoptable pets that come to them from different shelters and from many different systems, and we load those adoptable pets onto Helping Lost Pets, and we tell people that after your pet's been missing for a few days, you need to be looking at the adoptable pets as well. So, on Helping Lost Pets, you can search for founds and you can search for adoptables all in one query. You don't have to do anything special to do that. Now, it would be quite a simple thing, I would expect, for the shelters sending their adoptable pets through to just also include the found pets. We do actually have shelters that list with rescuegroups.org, list their found pets with rescuegroups.org, and those do come to us. But there's no reason why all these different shelter management software can't send their found pets to rescue groups, and then other systems like mine could pick up the found pets from there as well, and that would solve a huge part of the problem right there.
Yeah, and the other thing, and this is going to be a little bit of a transition point here, because one of my frustrations about the lost and found pet systems is, it actually is technically a simple solution to, fix that. It's a simple solution. Just share the data, and and it's not really particularly complex data either. It's not like rocket science or something like that. It's really simple data. And so there's never been a part of animal sheltering where a national solution was so obviously needed. Like really leadership at the national level to step in and say, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to make a difference in this space. And we're going to take a very public position that if you're dealing with lost and found data, you should be open and transparent and sharing of that data, period. But the groups, the national groups, Humane Society of the United States, the ASPCA, Best Friends, Maddie's Fund, none of the agencies that I have followed in any way, shape, or form have done anything, even though this is clearly a national problem that needs a national solution. They've completely, it seems, washed their hands of it. And instead of fixing the problem, are running around making it worse by doing things like advocating for shortened stray hold periods for pets in shelters, which means owners have less time to even try to find their pets if it ends up in a shelter. And both Susan and Kathy have dealt with that. So Kathy, can you talk a little about what happened in Wisconsin and the shortened stray hold period there? And by the way, I should say I've invited Best Friends and the Humane Society of the United States to come and have this conversation with us, and both of them declined to participate. But both of them were basically advocating for shortened stray hold periods in Wisconsin. Can you explain?
It was a very troubling time. Basically, we had a 7-day stray hold in Wisconsin, which admittedly is very generous, but as I said, we have a very, very broken system in Wisconsin. We have stray holding facilities that do not even have microchip scanners, and so the thought of reducing the stray hold period without fixing all of the problems first, using a centralized database, posting photos online, all the things we've been talking about, just seemed to be ludicrous to us, that there would actually be a push to reduce the stray hold. So what actually happened was we had a good bill moving through the legislature that was set up to protect the what we call court case dogs or seized dogs, and 2 of our Milwaukee facilities, the Wisconsin Humane Society and Milwaukee Animal Control, sat in on drafting that bill with the representative from the bill, which was not from Milwaukee, he was from another part of Wisconsin, and actually added in the section about reducing the stray hold. I don't even think he realized the implications of that. He wanted to, this legislator, he just wanted to help the court case dogs. That was his mission. They slipped in that paragraph about reducing the stray hold in Wisconsin from 7 days to 4 days. And unfortunately, Best Friends stepped in and supported that as well. The HSUS supported it as well, and the bill passed. Even though there was a huge public outcry, there's many shelters that do not support it. It was basically 2 shelters in a very small area of the state that went ahead and had that rammed through without input from everybody. And what a lot of the other shelter directors were saying, and what we were saying is, let's fix this system first and then talk about reducing the stray hold. But unfortunately, it was once Best Friends and the HSUS got behind it, they started sending out their alerts. They started sending out email alerts to supporters, basically saying this bill will save lives, and so people would just sign on or pass it on to their legislator without really thinking about, but this is interfering with the human-animal bond. This is at the expense of owned animals that we were doing this.
There's a part of that when I followed the conversation and watched them, I would say, marketing materials that were sent out by Best Friends and HSUS. There was information in there that I would describe as just false. It may have been technically correct because they would say things like, this law will allow shelters to adopt found pets out sooner, which is true, but the lie is the unspoken, a lie of omission. It's, when a lie of omission, when you omit critical information from the message, it's the same as lying. And so from my point of view, they did lie about it because they never said, oh, by the way, the other thing that this law change does is it allows shelters to kill animals faster. And so omitting that critical piece of, what is allowed in that law, it completely misrepresented it to their members and donors and supporters. And it was horrific to me, frankly, to watch these national organizations who profess to be about advocating for animals arguing for a shortened stray hold period. And I have just a slightly different perspective on the, the length of holding period in Wisconsin, it was, because it's important to kind of synchronize the language between other states. So in Wisconsin, it was a 7-day holding period. But in Minnesota, right next door, ours is 5 business days. And since most municipal shelters aren't open weekends, it's the same as a week. So it sounds less in Minnesota, but it was actually exactly the same. And so I think that needs to be put in perspective too. In Wisconsin, I think a lot of the shelters aren't open weekends. And so if it's 7 days and not 7 business days, it really is 5 days. Right. From my perspective. And, it went from 5 days now potentially down to 3. That's a dramatic change.
The numbers game that they played was, like you said, very deceiving, because then they said that, oh, well, we couldn't possibly adopt out an animal until the 6th day because we still have to, there's a day for intake and spay and neuter. I mean, it was like they were trying to confuse people to make it look like you said, they were just trying to make it very confusing. They also said multiple times that Wisconsin had the longest stray hold in the country, making it sound like it was the only state in the country with a 7-day stray hold, where there's other states with a 7-day stray hold, and there are some states that have, if the animal comes in with any sort of identification, they have a 10-day stray hold. There's even municipalities in Illinois that have that. So I think that they really just kind of played on people's emotions that these animals were languishing in the shelter for 7 days, and they use that word several times, whereas we know that's not true. I mean, we go on vacation and leave our dogs for 7 days in a kennel. They're not languishing. They're still my dogs when I come home. I mean, I think some of that, this idea that we just need to get animals in and shove them out the door again as quickly as we can has really been a breakdown now of the human-animal bond, that these are loved family pets, and the people just need a little bit of time to find them or to come up with the money to be able to reclaim them, because that's also another big problem that we have. By the time the people have found where their pet is, they might find their pet on Wednesday, but they don't get paid till Friday, and they don't have the funds to be able to go and reclaim their pet. So they need a couple of extra days to come up with the funds. Yeah. So
I'm curious if I can get Susan to weigh in a little bit on that ordinance change or the law change, and how she sees it potentially impacting animals. And especially important because they're actually going around pushing the same sort of agenda in other states now.
Yes, I was. That was just brought up in the commission meeting at Chicago Animal Control, that that many facilities are looking at Chicago because of this the stray hold period reduced to 0 for cats, and that they're saying that they have over a 90% live release rate. And again, at whose expense? It's the animals and their owners. And it comes back to, there was no public discussion, at least on our end in Chicago. There was no marketing of this reduced stray hold. There was no kind of free and low-cost microchips into areas where we could have, gone out and make sure that the cats that are people's cats would be microchipped. I mean, all they're just focusing on is this live release rate, and that they're saying, they have over a 90% live release rate, but how many owners are not able to find their own cats? And cats are totally different than dogs, as we all know. And to me personally, I feel like they've become, again, second-class citizens, cats have, and their owners.
Well, it's to me, the whole conversation about stray holds and cats and shelters gets really convoluted because it opens up this whole other topic I'm fairly passionate about, which is, in most municipalities around the United States, cats are allowed to roam outside. I mean, there's no containment law for them. So why are shelters rounding them up in the first place? In my neighborhood, like, I have a garden in my yard, and so like the neighborhood cats to come to my garden because they help keep some of the rabbits and chipmunks from eating my food. And so I put catnip in my garden, so I know all of our neighborhood cats. They've been out there for years. They're allowed to roam perfectly. But it wasn't that long ago that all of the shelters in our area were openly encouraging people to go get those cats and bring them into the shelter. They're not lost. They don't need shelter. They're just fine. But then then they run around and say, we're going to pick up these cats and not even hold them to give the owners a chance to find them. How is that not advocating stealing people's pets? That's what it looks like to me. You know, that might be an extreme position, but now Rob is like nodding his head vigorously. What do you have to say about that?
Well, it's just, you know, we can the database can make such a huge impact for cats. You know, cat behavior is such that many times a cat that goes missing, particularly an indoor cat, they will not travel very far. Usually they're found within 8 houses of where they went missing. And so imagine if you had a black cat that was missing, and you could go on to a map and look at every black cat found within a block of your home. It's gonna be so easy for you to find your cat. And that's really the tragedy in all of this, is that you know, people that have a dog missing, I see many times, if they have the time and their resources to spend to search and find their dog, many times they can, but oh, it's such a nightmare sometimes that they have to go through. But with a cat, it's much more difficult to find them, and so, you know, if you love cats, we need a national database for cats.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's the issues really are the same for both dogs and cats, and I agree. There's not a lot of logical reason to treat them differently unless the law is that cats are allowed to run loose. I don't think there's probably a lot of people who would advocate for letting dogs run loose, you know. But cats have been that way as long as I know, and the vast majority, according to the cats. The stream of cats coming through my front yard on a daily basis, they're all doing just fine and really can just be left alone. So I'm just curious if anybody's got any final thoughts about any of that. The computer systems, the lack of cooperation, the advocacy for shortened stray hold periods in the context of that. It all just seems like all of the players, for the most part, all of the big national players are, from my point of view, failing at their responsibility to, you know, keep the system up and working, and so it's not. And so HSUS, so Best Friends, so ASPCA, what are you going to do about it? Step up, make a difference. Anybody have anything to say about any of that in conclusion to wrap up?
Well, I can say something. I don't think this was brought up at all, that our Lost Dogs of America, which is founded by Illinois and Wisconsin, we're all partners with Helping Lost Pets because we really felt this was an important database to partner with. All of our lost dogs and all of the, well, at least on our site, on Illinois, all of the dogs that are being held in Good Samaritan homes are posted onto Helping Lost Pets national website. And we're trying to encourage all the vet clinics, all the shelters, the police departments, stray holding facilities to use Helping Lost Pets so we can have that one national database. And Wisconsin is a member, and so is Iowa, Indiana, because we do know that animals don't know boundaries, especially state boundaries. So it gives our owners of lost pets and finders another resource because they can look at the total map to see if maybe their dog has wandered into Wisconsin or Iowa or was brought in, you know, driven up there. So I just wanted to state that we are partnerships, and I think we have 27 states now, Kathy. That's our
28.
28 states that are members of Lost Dogs of America, which partner with Helping Lost Pets.
That's all. I think really, it's so interesting that, you know, and it's so true so often, so much of the time, that the real change has to come from the grassroots advocates who are dealing with the problems created by the larger national agencies. And that clearly seems to be exactly what's happening in this space. You know, and it's why, you know, with my software, you know, of course, we share our stray pets that come to shelters that, you know, they flag that way automatically also go to helping lost pets. I mean, it's the only system that I know of, you know, in the lost and found pet area that works that way. So, well, I appreciate all. Anybody else have any last closing statements or closing words about any of that?
I'd like to say something. I would just like to say, you talked a little bit about the national organizations, and I think in the past the focus has been on adoptions, you know, and I think that had its time and place, and that was wonderful. But with an estimated 40 to 60% of animals that enter shelters being lost pets, I would just love to see the focus change now from either, you know, from helping those lost pets get home. It's just not been an item that has had a lot of attention. You go to any of the big conferences, and if they have one session on lost pets, that might be, you're lucky, because generally there's either one or none. And I just think it's time. It's time for them to recognize that this is a problem that they need to all get behind and address, because adoptions are great, but why adopt out an animal that already has a home?
Yeah, it's sort of funny. I'll kind of close my thoughts with this. I was recently having a debate with a shelter in Wisconsin that actually supported the shortened stray hold period. And they said some of the things that you had said, like, you know, we have a nearly 100% live release rate. So, you know, why would we encourage holding the pets longer? Well, you know, and I was, you know, frankly flabbergasted, because this is somebody who works high up at an animal shelter, and the obvious response to that question is, so the owners have an easier time trying to find it. You know, that's such an obvious, simple answer,
Yeah.
but it's like not even in their brains. And especially if they're running around scooping up animals that don't need, you know, rescue.
Yeah.
You know, then the entire system is dysfunctional and broken, and we can all do better. I would just like to thank you for helping share some insight, all of you, into this interesting topic. I guarantee you it's a conversation that will continue long into the future, and a message to all of you companies who are microchip, pet registry, lost and found pet data. Call Rob or call myself, putting the phone numbers up on the screen right now. So you can figure out how can you work with us to share this data, to get, you know, a universal standard for sharing lost and found pet data, so we can begin fixing this. And thank you all. Thanks for watching, and thank you all for the work that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.